Well, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, and welcome to the Penn Vicarage. Lovely church yesterday. Back to my boring old study today. But thank you for joining us for our Bible reading for today. We are working our way through our adventure through the letter to the Hebrews, reminding you the message all the way through being simply this, really, that Jesus is fantastic, and don't go away from the faith, because Jesus is such a fantastic person, fantastic God, fantastic Saviour, fantastic everything, that you wouldn't want to drift away, would you? That's kind of the message of the whole of the book of Hebrews. So however it is, whatever's going on for you, hang on in there, because Jesus is worth it, and that's what this message is about. And this morning we pick up another facet of that in this morning's reading, picking up on the Melchizedek stuff yesterday and so on. Yet another reason today why Jesus is so fantastic, and we wouldn't want to drift away from him, would we? Here goes, without further ado even, Hebrews chapter 7, starting to read at verse 11. Here goes. For if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for the people received the law under his priesthood, what further need would there be to speak of another priest arising according to the order of Melchizedek, rather than one according to the order of Aaron? For when there is a change in the priesthood, there's necessarily a change in the law as well. Now the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it's evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses spoke nothing about priests. It's even more obvious when another priest arises, resembling Melchizedek, one who has become a priest, not through a legal requirement concerning physical descent, but through the power of an indestructible life. For it's attested of him, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. There is on the one hand the abrogation of an earlier commandment, because it was weak and ineffectual, for the Lord made nothing perfect. There is on the other hand the introduction of a better hope, through which we approach God. This was confirmed with an oath, for others became priests, took their office without an oath, but this one became a priest with an oath, because of the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind, you're a priest forever. Accordingly, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Furthermore, the former priests were many in number, because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he holds his priesthood permanently, because he continues forever. Consequently, he's able for all time to save those who approach God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, blameless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he has no need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the other people. This he did once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priest those who are subject to weakness, but the word of an oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who's been made perfect forever. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, well, what this is saying this morning is that Jesus is fantastic because Jesus is our high priest. Now, somebody might ask the obvious question, why do we need another priest? Because in the Old Testament, there were priests already. They were of the house of Aaron, of the line of Judah, and that's where they used to get the priesthood from. And there were all sorts, if you read through the books like Leviticus and so on, it outlines how they're ordained and where they come from and the family background and so on. So there were already priests before the time of Jesus. And yet, with Jesus, Psalm 110 says, this is my son, who I'm well, and so on, and you are to be a priest unto the order of Melchizedek. In other words, Jesus, because he's the Son of God, as said in 110, you will become a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. In other words, God is doing a new thing. Formerly, there were already priests. Of course there were, under the line of Judah and so on. But what he's saying is now there is something new with the Son of God, Jesus, a new kind of priest. He is the new priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Thus, out with the old and in with the new. There had been priests before, according to the line of Aaron and Judah. Now there's a new high priest in Jesus. Why do we need a new high priest? Because Jesus' high priestness is much better than the old one. And he goes on to say why it's so much better. Firstly, because he says that that when Jesus becomes a high priest, it's done with an oath, because it says in Psalm 120, the Lord has sworn and he will not retract. You are a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So what the writer is saying here is that Jesus, the Son of God, is made priest according to an oath by God. There was no such oath when it came to the priests before that, according to Aaron and Judah. So one reason why Jesus' priesthood is so much better than theirs is because Jesus was made priest by an oath from God. Unlike the others, they had no oath. He had an oath, hence his priesthood is so much better. Second reason is because he says they were subject to weakness and they were tempted and so on. So whenever they went in to sacrifice for the people and to talk to God on their behalf, which is what priests do, they used to have to make sacrifice for their own sin first before they went on to make sacrifice for everybody else. So because they weren't perfect, because they'd sinned, and so on and so on and so on, before they could pray for the rest of us, before they could make sacrifice for the rest of us, they had to make sacrifice for their own sin because they were weak and so on. Jesus, on the other hand, doesn't have to do that because he made the sacrifice all those years ago by giving himself on the cross, and he is perfect anyway. So he doesn't need to make sacrifice. So he can just go straight to God all the time, and he can talk to God for us, and he can, and the sacrifice has been made because it's already been done. So reason number two why Jesus' priesthood is so much better than his priesthood before is because he is perfect, because the sacrifice is already made. He doesn't have to keep going in and make sacrifice all the time because he's already done it, and because he's perfect, he doesn't have to anyway. So that's reason number two why his priesthood is so much better. So firstly, it's better because it was brought in by an oath from God. And the second reason it's better is because he is perfect and he hasn't got to make sacrifice for himself every time he goes in. The third reason is this, because his life is indestructible. Priests before him, obviously they'd live perhaps 70 years and 10. Who knows how many years they live for. But the point being, they'd live for a while and they'd do the priesthood bit for a while and then they would die and they wouldn't do the priesthood bit anymore and someone else would take over. So in other words, they did it for a time and a season because their bodies would wear out and they'd die and they couldn't do it anymore. Okay, like I will do one day and so on. Jesus, on the other hand, because he is raised from the dead, dies no more. Death has no more dominion over him. He lives forever. He doesn't have to stop. Jesus doesn't have to go into gentle retirement. Jesus has died and risen again, so he won't die again. So his life is indestructible. So he will not need to be replaced. His life is indestructible, and his priesthood will carry on forever. So, in our reading for this morning, again we hear, why shouldn't we give up our Christian faith? Why shouldn't we buckle? Because Jesus is worth it. And another reason to why Jesus is worth it, we find out today, is because Jesus is our high priest. And he's so much better than the high priest we'd had before. Firstly, because unlike theirs, his priesthood was brought about by an oath from God, which you hear about in Psalm 110. The second reason is because he is perfect, and unlike the previous priests who had to keep making sacrifices themselves, he doesn't need to because he's already done it and his life's perfect anyway. He doesn't need to do that. So, in a sense, because he's perfect, he can do it straight away and more consistently. And the third reason is because unlike them, who would live for a while, be priests for a while, and then retire and they die, his life goes on forever. Therefore, his priesthood is in perpetuity. His priesthood carries on forever, and he's there forever for you and for me. Why follow him? Because he's brilliant, and he's worth it, and he's on our side. Yet more reasons why we should keep the faith, keep following Jesus, because, as they might say, because he's worth it. More tomorrow. God bless you. Have